Good afternoon, everyone. This is your friend Adeel Rizvi, and I'm here today with a brand new episode of our webinar with a very, very diverse guest that we have today. Before I introduce my very good friend and our guest, just a quick word about if you're watching this webinar live or if you're watching the recording, please share your feedback, share your questions that you may have come in your mind after watching this particular webinar. And just a quick word about myself. My name is Adeel Rizvi. I'm a property strategist and I help families create financial legacy through secure and scalable property investing solutions. That's all about myself for today. I would like to introduce our very esteemed guest and a great friend of mine, Mr. Ray Ramsey. Hi, Ray. How are you?
Hey, it's always good to jump on board, mate. It's always a pleasure. I'm glad you asked me on this. I love the subject. It's so cool, and the service that you provide is wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Ray. And today we'll be talking about what you do and what you offer. So, very quick introduction for Ray. Ray is a podcaster, Ray is a behavioral psychologist. Ray has been the best selling author as well. And we will talk about some of his writing gigs today as well. And he is a risk management professional. So, he is a lot of things in one man. And I'm sure you're the master of all of them, isn't it, Ray?
I wouldn't say that. I think they call it jack of all trades, master of some.
Beautiful, now beautiful. I love your sense of humor, mate. Whenever we meet, so risk management, it is such a broad term, and I would like to start with our first question. We will be touching different topics and how you help
Yeah.
businesses and how you help them grow, and not just by saving on their cost, but also help them increase their revenue. And that applies to any business. Like risk management should be with any kind of business, whether it's services business, it's retail, any other kind of business, whether it's tradies or whatever. But what made you to start thinking that you should be a risk management professional?
Well, it's like I started in banking 40 years ago. And back in the 80s and early 90s, there wasn't such a term as risk management. That
Yep.
was, they referred to it as financial analysis, or they referred to it as standard operations. And it wasn't actually till the late 90s that the actual term risk management actually came to the forefront.
Yep.
Back in the early days, risk management was associated with personal security and personal protection. But now it's branched out and it's a lot more diverse than what it is. So, it caters standard enterprise risk for all companies. And all companies should have a risk management plan just to address their financial risk, just to address operations, just to address exchange rates if they're dealing with overseas. Because basically that's where companies fail, by not having at least a high level robust risk management plan. And
Yep.
I've seen so many companies fail because they don't adhere to it. And it's not a big deal. Think of it like this: if you have an accident at your place of business and you don't have insurance for public liability, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to be hit with a huge bill, or you're going to get sued and you've got nowhere to cover it, and that will affect your turnover. This is standard practice. And like a lot of companies, they don't have that in their risk management plan, and it's an afterthought to have
Yep.
basic insurance.
Exactly. And I think that is where the insurance is part of the big risk management plan. It's not the overall risk management plan, isn't it?
No, no, it's part of it. It's part of it because, and that's what when they refer to, how do we cater for this type of event? Well, you're going to transfer the risk to the insurance company, and you just pay that amount. So if that risk
Yep.
does eventuate, you've got it mitigated. It's and when you think about it, we do risk management, and you, me, everybody on the planet does risk management every day that they're up and about.
Yep.
Because think about it like this: when you go to cross the road, a busy road, do you just walk out into traffic and hope they stop? Or do you go to a crossing and use the lights, what like most people do? And it's the
Yep.
same if within the household. if you've got boiling water in the kettle, do you pour it over your hand, or do you do the right thing and use the apparatus correctly? It's very
Exactly.
similar. So
Yep.
everybody does risk management. Subconsciously, they do it. Whether they know they're doing it is irrelevant because they're doing it subconsciously.
Exactly. No, that's great. And what were you doing before you entered into risk management world? What were you doing before that?
I started in banking back in 1983. So what's that, 41 years ago? Oh, I'm showing my age
Wow.
here. I'm only 59. Okay. Uh, and I was involved in, I did bank telling, I did loans, I was involved in three armed holdups before I was 21. So that was
Yep.
enjoyable. And I did that for like, I worked there for 10 years. I moved into banking software for a couple of software companies.
Yep.
And then I moved overseas into Europe. And I worked in Europe for like 13, 14 years. And the last 8, I was chief risk officer for one of the biggest banks in Europe. So, and that's actually where I really learned what risk management was, because I looked at market risks, operational risk, high net worth transactions, and ensured that our bank became very successful because we had proper processes and policies in place. And
Mm.
the big thing is you need to do training.
Yep.
If people aren't trained correctly, they're going to make mistakes. And the other
Yep.
thing is you've got to ensure that people aren't overburdened by too much work. So you've got to have the correct workforce in place. And that's
Okay.
about it for me.
Yep. No,
And
that's good.
now I do and now I do behavioral psychology.
You do, and like I knew all of this story, but I just asked you the question so that our viewers can actually understand your background as well. I would like to ask from the perspective of a common business owner, like who are making less than $2 million, which is the definition of a small business in Australia. People
Yeah.
who are like a one-man band or they have a small team and they're making up to $2 million a year in terms of revenue. What should be the risk management uh, question that should come in their mind? Like, how should they approach risk management formally, in a formal way? What should they be doing? The first two things, first three things.
Well, the first thing is to actually look at their business model and
Yep.
say, where are the pitfalls in it, or where are the major failures in this model?
Yep.
Um, like, and we mentioned it before, like I helped a small sports store who
Yeah, I
had,
would want to actually talk about it because this is a very much relevant where I think there's a small sports store and they were going through something which Ray would explain now. And how did you turn it around for them, Ray? I would be keen for you to share with our audience.
and this is very interesting. They're a small sports store, but their products were so diverse. Like they cater for virtually everything. It was almost like what you see in some of the huge sports stores,
Yep.
where they have huge stock, like Rebel, that have all this different type of sports equipment. And they were wondering why they were unable to pay their rent, basically, and unable to pay their staff. And I sat down with them and I went through, let's do a risk management plan and let's look at how we could turn this around. And the main thing was, I said, let's do some market research and we'll look at what dynamic or what your customers actually want. What do you sell the most of? Then we get rid of everything else. So they concentrated on having soccer equipment with jerseys, and rugby league having jerseys and footballs and boots and things like that. So they diversified what they were actually selling.
Yep.
And all the other stock they resold back to the suppliers, and they were able to continue on. But the thing was, they had too much there. They wanted to do too much, but weren't getting the turnover that they required to stay in business. So by diversifying and keeping it into a small targeted set of products, they were able to stay afloat. And it also made it easier to do marketing, so they could target their marketing, which is also part of your risk management plan on how you grow your business.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a very key takeaway for all the people who are listening there, because we have to make sure that we don't spread too wide. It's always good to be diverse in your business, whatever you are doing, whether it's a service based business or whether it's a product based business. But if you spread too far and wide and you don't have a market for that and you can't tap that market, then that is where I think you have to revisit your business plan. And that is also part of risk management, isn't it, Ray?
Spot on, spot on. I was
Beautiful,
just going to,
beautiful. Yep,
and because I love what you do, and I'll just tell everybody here now, I use a buyer's agent. Whenever I bought property, I use a buyer's agent. I can't recommend Adeel highly enough. He's a great guy. He's a really great businessman. He knows what he's doing. And I'll say now, everybody is time poor, and a buyer's agent helps you with that particular problem. Because I've used buyer's agents. Any property I bought, I use the buyer's agent because it saves me time. I don't have the time to run around and look at properties, but you pay for a service and you make sure you get that service.
no, thank you
That's
very
what I
much for your
want
kind words, Ray.
that.
I appreciate that. But when now you brought property into the discussion, so let me ask you about how, very quickly, if you want to share, how were you doing risk management when you were buying your properties? Were you doing any risk management at all? If you want to briefly share that with us.
What I always did with like with the buyer's agent, we gave them what we were after. We gave them the specs, what we
Yep,
were after, what areas we wanted to buy in, because my wife and I did detailed research into the
yep,
areas that had growth, that had
yep.
high yield, but also we were looking at international companies that operated in those particular areas that were looking for tenancies to place their executives. So we were very lucky and we got two properties, and part of our mitigation plan was to ensure that we had long-term tenancy within our properties. And
There you
we got two 10-year contracts. So we had guaranteed income for 10 years. So even if they had no one in there, the company still paid us, because
That's
sometimes they
great.
use it for short-term tenancy. And that's how we ensured that we weren't going to miss any loan repayments. We weren't going to get a bad mark on our credit history. And they're things you need to look at. One of the and
Exactly.
like, and I'll tell you one of the other things. I know you do houses, and I recommend get a house. It's really good, especially if you want to buy in Queensland or somewhere like that. Fantastic opportunity. When we look at buying apartments, we also look at tenancy rates within the area. We look at the strata report. Now that's a big tip, because you want to know what sort of capital works are in the program and how they've been spending their sinking fund for the past 5 years.
That's very important. Yep. You don't want to get a $30,000 bill 6 months after buying a property because you missed something in the strata report. And coming back to our original topic, and I would want to relate because it's very much relatable what you are suggesting about your properties that you bought, Ray, and you did that risk management where you made sure that you had tenants in place. So what you were doing was essentially you were treating your property investments like a business,
Oh,
and you were
yeah,
making sure that whatever you invest in there, you put your deposit, you will have to pay a loan over the period of 30 years, and you were trying to ensure that you still get good rental income consistently for 10-year period, so you locked that in, so your cash flow was secured. And at the same time you were doing your market research to be able to buy in areas which will have good growth as well. So you were
correct.
getting the growth, you were getting the rental income, so essentially what you were doing is you were mitigating your risk. That was your risk management plan for your own property portfolio business. Is
And
that
there
right?
was a, that's 100% correct. And there was another dynamic within our mitigation strategy, and that was to ensure that we never went into positive gearing, because this was part of our taxation strategy, was to ensure
Yep.
that these properties were negatively geared. Even if it's only $50 or $100, it
Yep.
still works out as a benefit from a tax perspective. And nobody wants to pay more tax than they need to.
Yeah, and having said that, that is part of the strategy. So whatever we are discussing over here, guys, just want to give a disclaimer. This is no, in no shape or form, any kind of taxation advice or any kind of financial advice that we are giving here. We
Correct.
are discussing a generic scenario. So make sure you seek independent advice separately outside of this forum before you act on any information which we are talking about here. But negative gearing is also a strategy which applies to some people, and that comes down to, and we discussed that strategy with people who have a certain kind of income, who are paying already 45% of tax, and now they have to make sure that they can reduce their tax in a meaningful way without
Yeah.
affecting the ability to keep growing their portfolio. It may or may not apply to you. Some people will need to have positive gearing in their portfolio. Some people, like Ray, would have to have negative gearing, which is perfectly fine as well. Some people would like to buy apartments because that is where they see growth. Some people would want to stick with being a borderless investor, buying interstate, buying for houses and going for land, and still getting good growth and good rental income. So again, these are different strategies, and they all have their own certain kind of risk management plans that have to be evaluated. So thank you very much for sharing that example, Ray. And how, if there is a trades business, I want to focus on trades and service based businesses. If they want to have a risk management evaluated, what do they need to do? Because a lot of times people have a business plan written down on a piece of paper, but they're just running, they're doing day to day tasks, they're getting revenue, they're getting their expenses out. So, what are the biggest risks that they should be careful of?
The biggest risks that especially tradies need to be, they need to have their public liability insurance. That's number one.
Yep,
Okay. So if you're working for yourself, you need income protection. That's number two.
yep,
Um, and the other thing is, as part of your risk management plan, you also need to have a WHS plan tied
yep,
into that, because you can't afford for you to be injured on a work site, for anyone working for you to be injured on a work site. And it's my book, Secrets. It's actually a collaboration book. I wrote one chapter in this, and it's on how we actually use psychological profiling to ensure safety on a huge mega project. So those of you who have been to Central Station lately, you've probably seen all the new underground works that were done there. Brand new metro station going in. Uh, I ran the risk and safety components for that program, and we went 5 years without a major injury or a fatality. And that was basically ensuring we used behavioral conditioning to make people make decisions correctly.
yep.
So to stay safe. And that's basically how I handled the risk management for that particular area. But, I didn't do it by myself. Everybody had to get on board. And this is about managing your stakeholders and stakeholder expectation and communication plans.
Exactly.
So,
I think, yep, perfectly agree with that. And you talk about stakeholder management, that is the biggest part of risk management. I would just like to, it reminds me of an example where, as part of risk management, we are trying to understand what our stakeholders want when we are helping our clients in what we do. And just a very quick example where we had a situation recently where there was a seller who did not actually really want to sell the property. So they were not a seller by the definition, but because we have such a low stock on market, and once we got to know that they may be considering to sell, and we offered them, okay, because you love the property and you don't want to sell because you still want to live in that property, why don't you consider selling it to my client who's looking to buy an investment anyway, and it will be an investment property for them. But how about if you keep living in that property as a tenant and you still sell it to us? And that actually clicked with them, and they were like, yeah, we are happy to pay you the market rent. So we did not actually budge down on the rent of the property. But knowing that what the stakeholder was looking for, and seller is a very important stakeholder in our transactions for property, we managed to mitigate that risk that we were not able to find the stock. So we actually
yeah.
found the stock. We offered them the place, so it was a win-win situation for them as well. They were able to live in the house they lived. They were giving us the rent, and we secured the property at the right market value. In the last 6 months, that has gone up by nearly 9% already. And the purpose of that is, if we wouldn't have done that, we may have been still searching for at least 1 or 2 more months
And
and
this
paying more
is,
price for the same property again. So that is, again, I would treat it as a risk management, isn't it?
it is definitely 100%. And this is the benefits about investing in property. Number one, you've got to look at it as a business.
Yes.
You can't be personal about any of these transactions. You've got to be cold hearted, look at it as a business. Like
Yep.
it took my wife a bit to convince me, because I'm so psycho risk about everything. But
Yep.
when I actually sat down and actually thought about it, like we bought two investment properties 15 years ago. They're still going very well. They're providing us a level of protection for our retirement. But the
Yep.
thing is, because of the values in Sydney, they've actually doubled, if not more, in the valuation. So you've got to go the long term. It's the long term haul.
Yep.
But that's got to be part of your risk management strategy. You've got to be prepared to understand what that risk is, how long it's going to be for, and what your mitigations in place are. And like we've got those in place, and therefore our retirement. So when we retire, we'll sell those and we'll live off the profits.
Beautiful. And as you mentioned, it's a long term game. Yes, we like to have short term gains in property so that we can keep leveraging, keep building that equity of like 20% in the first couple of years and keep buying more, using that equity as a deposit for next purchase. But at the end of the day, it's a long term investment. And if we don't have our risk mitigation done correctly at the beginning of the process,
Mm.
then after 10 years, what we will know is, oh, wow, we have wasted 10 years now. Can we get that time back? That's the question. We can never get the time back.
And this is one of the big things about doing your research as part of your risk management plan.
Yeah.
Researching the property, and it's a big thing to look at what internal works have they done on the property in the last 6 to 12 months. Uh, we looked at my wife and I. We looked at buying I think it was a townhouse. It was a free one, but they knocked out one of the walls to make it bigger in the living room kitchen area.
Yep.
And I wanted to see the certification of the builder that did it, and they couldn't provide that. And I said, well, we're not buying that.
Yep.
18 months
Exactly.
later, they had to get special builders in to redo all those works because they were done on the cheap. They weren't done properly. And that was part of our risk management plan. If you can't provide
Exactly.
us with the evidence, we're not going to buy it.
Yep. Very true. Very true. And we have Christine Bell. Great to see you, Christine. And she talks about, yes, definitely you need to have to do your market research. That's a great advice, she says, Ray. I'm just conscious of the time, Ray. Any parting thoughts around risk management or around behavioral psychology, which can help businesses moving forward?
Big thing with I'll just talk very quickly about behavioral psychology. Okay, I look at toxic workplaces, toxicity in the workplaces, and how people treat each other in the workplace. It starts at the top. If you're running a business, treat all your people with respect. Make sure they're trained properly and don't overload them. Because if people are working at more than their 8 hours a day, for every hour they work extra, their error percentage rate goes up 20%. So,
Wow.
and every time somebody makes an error, that costs money. So make sure you've got the correct staff in place. Make sure everyone's working the proper hours. Treat people with respect, and you'll have a great place to work at. And that's all part of your people risk management plan.
It is. It is. So, some great pieces of wisdom today, Ray. I just wanted to understand if someone wants to have a further discussion whether their business has the right risk management plans in place or how they can improve the risk mitigation techniques, how they can reduce the risk in their business to increase their profitability or to reduce their cost, how they can reach out to you.
Okay, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'll put the link in the chat. That's no problem. Uh, Mainly LinkedIn's my main contact at the moment, or you can get us at the company I work for. We do purely risk management, big program infrastructure risk, but also enterprise risk for businesses. We do a lot of
Yep.
that at the moment, and that's at www.metropolisadvisory.com.au. We're a very boutique risk management company, and we cater for everybody. And if you want to just ask simple questions about risk management, I'm happy to help. You can just send me to LinkedIn Messenger, and I can provide you with my phone number and whatever other information that you might require to come across. Behavioral psychology, they call me the toxic terminator because I address toxic workplaces, and that's my main goal at the moment.
Exactly. Now, thank you very much, Ray, for being open and sharing the way how people can reach out to you and contact you. And we have two over here. Thank you very much, two, for your comment. She said that we have to treat our staff well so that they will be working harder for us and looking after our clients. Thank you, two, for your comment as well. Two was with us in our webinar last week, this time. So thank you for tuning in again, too. Thank you so very much, Ray, for your time today, for all the golden words you have shared with us. I'm just conscious of the time, so we will wrap it up now. But thank you very much. I'll see you on Friday.
Yes,
In
you
the
will.
networking event, and we will take it on from there. But thank you so very much for your time today.
No, no, it's a pleasure, Adeel, and yeah, I really enjoy having conversations with you. We always have a good time when we get together. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone got something out of it today.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Denali, for your comment as well. And thank you everyone for tuning in. If you are watching the recording, please share your feedback, share your questions, how Ray can actually help you improve your business and improve your risk management plan. Thank you so very much for now. And we'll see you next time around with next week's webinar. Thanks very much, Ray. See you all.
Thanks, mate.